Our final honoree today, Dr. Jim Gawel, has devoted himself in his faculty position to creating connections and building pathways for students in the local community to move into careers in the sciences. He has done this by building a pipeline for student access to the sciences through public engagement and education, and through creating higher education K-14 partnerships. Highlights include sustained workshops and partnerships with community college faculty, launching the South Sound Sustainability Expo, which is now a showpiece for the City of Tacoma's Office of Sustainability, working with Tacoma High School students on scientific research projects, and long-standing work with middle school students in order to engage them in science and scientific inquiry. His work has resulted in securing foundation funding, establishing a film festival, and hosting numerous student presentations, as well as the ongoing generation of interest in scientific work by students of all ages throughout the region. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jim Gawel.
So I'm going to talk, this is going to be a very picture-heavy type of thing. I am also very short because I'm a scientist and we are not allowed to give long talks usually. So 12 minutes is an eternity for scientists. So this is going to be nice and short. So first of all, very honored to get this award. Definitely this is one of the best recognitions that I think a faculty can have on this campus to make those community engagements. It is also kind of perplexing because I feel like a lot of what I did here was stuff that, one, I consider to be part of my job, so things that I think everybody should be doing, and two, it would definitely take away a lot of my fun if I didn't get to do all of this stuff. So this is, I had to come up with a fancy title because everybody else was asking for something like this. This is really having fun in education, in STEM education. But I'm going to steal an idea. Carolyn West actually gave her talk for the Distinguished Research Award last week. And so she gave a how did I get here type of thing. So this is a great excuse to show what I think I still look like in time, but I don't. So how did I actually get here? So early on, I learned how to like doing things outdoors and how to do outside work and how to do community engaged work when I was still in the Boy Scouts. So this is actually growing up in Kentucky. That's me on the left, if you can't actually tell that in the photo. And I learned that I like to do outdoor stuff, that I like to learn in the outdoors, that active engagement type learning. I happened to have in our Boy Scout troop in Kentucky a guy who was working on his master's degree in ichthyology. So we got to go electroshocking for fish in a creek, and we got to learn edible wild plants in the woods, and that sort of stuff. That stuff sticks with you. I still remember those. It turns out they're not as applicable in Western Washington because not the same plants, but you learn very quickly that's how you like to learn. It's how younger people like to learn, is getting them involved, getting hands-on, getting it in their own location so that they actually will walk by those things later on and it will stick. Even without thinking about it, those lessons will come back up. On the right, this is actually me doing community engaged trail building and trying to look buff as a 16-year-old. But the same idea. So I got an opportunity to do a lot of things that had to do with learning. I learned a lot of engineering, how to building trails. And at the end, you get to see something that you did that everybody else will be using for decades. And that sticks with you. And so I realized that this is really where things started to click for me, and how I would teach is how I liked to learn, is in that kind of active learning, hands-on, do something that actually matters, that you can actually show off to people later on. And then after the younger days, after I graduated from college, I got a little bit more dose of that. So this is actually me in the Peace Corps in Kenya, where I went after I finished my undergraduate, and I was a water engineer, which really, if you're doing good sustainable water engineering, all you need to know is that water flows downhill. So if you got that part down, and the next part you have to know is that you actually have to work with the community to actually make any project last and make any project happen. And they don't teach you that in engineering school, at least not at the time. They teach you all kinds of fancy things, but they don't teach you to actually talk to people. So that was one of the things I learned in my Peace Corps stint, was really how do you get the community involved? How do you get it so that they think the project is theirs at the end, so that they're more likely to actually continue to keep up that project, to go through the bureaucratic hassle of actually trying to get replacement parts, and you make it theirs. And then when I came back from the Peace Corps and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life after that point, I went into acting. I went into a place called Nature's Classroom, which is a wonderful environmental education program that's been around for decades out on the East Coast. They have about somewhere between 5 to 8 different campuses throughout New England. And so I got a job teaching K-12, or what was it? I guess it was second grade through high school. Students, they would come for a week during the school year, and our job was to try to interest them in science in an outdoor setting. So they stayed with us for 5 days in this place in the middle of Massachusetts in a camp there, and we got to take them out at night and during the day and all kinds of things to do different things to try to engage them in science and keep them interested. So I really learned how to reach kids from second grade up to, and when you have second graders from an affluent community in Connecticut versus 8th graders from inner city Manhattan, is a really different set of skills. And so each week, it was really interesting to try to figure out. It usually took me about a day to figure out how to reach that new group of students, because they came from wherever the hell it was. So that kind of taught me a lot about how to reach people. And again, that idea behind using engaged learning as well, and place-based stuff. And so then I went to grad school, and during that time, I actually came up with, you have a lot of work to do as a grad student, and undergrads are a great help if you actually treat them well. I had a lot of field work to do and a lot of lab work to do, so I actually started early in working with undergraduates in my research. So Heather Lucas, who's the woman on the left, and I love the computer in the background, because that was state of the art at the time. Heather actually now runs a nonprofit in the U.S., and she's an absolute dynamo. But she worked with me in the lab, and Dave there on the right side, he actually did field work with me. That's us in blackfly season in the mountains in New England doing sampling. I had a string of undergraduates and even a high school student from who worked with me, and she's now muckety-muck with EPA in Taiwan. So these students come in, they get a great experience doing research of different sorts. It sticks with them. They then want to go on and do more of that stuff. So that definitely clicked there at MIT, and I brought that here when I started at UW Tacoma. And so I've had all kinds of students work with me. So one of the things I learned when I came here, same year that Charlie did, was that to get what I had to get done, which included a teaching schedule and research expectations, that I had to combine those things in some way to make it work. And so I have a lot of undergraduates that work with me in the lab to be able to do the research that I do. But I also combine my teaching with that so that I can actually have them collect real information while they're doing their classes. So I hate busy work assignments. I like everything to have a purpose so that they take more interest in something if it actually means something to somebody, and it's not just a homework assignment that gets thrown away at the end of the quarter. And so I try to incorporate that as much as I can into my classes, and I then pilfer my good students to come out and do additional research with me outside. So Tiffany there on the left, she's actually doing work in a lab in Norway on one of our projects, and the people on the right are all standing on a floating log in the middle of Spirit Lake on another one of our more recent research projects. So overall, I came up with a really non-fancy Jim's philosophy for STEM education, which is to involve them early, make it unforgettable, make it important, and give them ownership. And the reason that I did this is when I first started here, I think the first year that I was here, or the first graduating class we had in environmental science was 4 students. And I knew that the program would have trouble staying that size, and then we needed to get students, but I just didn't want any students that came in. I wanted to try to reach students that were from this area. I wanted to reach students that we weren't getting in the door. And so part of that idea was to try to reach out to those students and figure out, how do I get them to want to do STEM stuff? How do I get them into science? How do I get them to go on to higher education? And at that time when I started, we were only an upper division school. Lots of people in the room I know remember that part. So we were only junior and senior year of college, and so we had to figure out where to go. So the first question is, how early do you start them, right? So as an upper division campus, we actually needed to be recruiting and involving students from the community college as well as down below. So one of the things I early on got the idea, I don't know why, is that it was about the time that people were starting to talk about bringing on lower division students, and I felt like the transfer students to some extent were getting ignored at that time because all the resources were going to the new freshmen. And so we started these faculty institutes where we brought in, the first year it was faculty from TCC, Pierce, and UW-T, and the whole idea was to come up with collaborative projects that the different students could work on together so that community college students would actually see themselves as continuing to get a four-year degree. Because it turns out that it's a tough transition between sophomore and junior year in college. It's an even tougher transition if you're actually moving from one place to another and also going from sophomore to junior year in college. So we did 3 of these different workshops in 05, 07, and 09 at different stages. And it's amazing to see some of the pictures from these workshops because some of those people are now deans and administrators at the community colleges. And they all, we still talk to each other on how do we actually pull off collaborations like this. And so this was one way to try to reach those students at the community college, was to get them in the door, to get them to think that they too could finish their four-year degree and go on. Then we also did stuff with high schools. So one of the things I also believe in is that, again, no busy work assignments. So we were trying to come up with things that would collect real data. So these are actually, I had SAMI, for those of you who don't know, SAMI, Science and Math Institute, is one of the high schools in Tacoma, and a School of the Arts is SOTA, and Lincoln High School. So over multiple years, I've worked with their students on collecting mussels and marine worms at one point to do experiments looking at metal impacts on Puget Sound. So this is some of the students grabbing samples off of the docks down on the Theophos Waterway. But several of these students have gone on to do, some of them I've actually seen here at UW-T since then. So we want to involve them early, so we have to go after them in high school. We have to go after them even before that, so we need to go after them in middle school. I have elementary school, yes, but boy, that's a whole different thing. So I've gone down as far as middle school. I have yet to have the energy to actually try to reach kids in elementary school yet. So we want to get them early, and then we want to make it unforgettable. And one of the things I've learned, because I do environmental science, is that stinky is really hard to forget. So we actually had a set of students. One of the things that I found is that, again, it's the idea of getting them to project the idea that they could be scientists, that it's not just other people being scientists, they can be. One of the things that I found out that was just amazing to me is kids, if you give them a lab coat, they will wear it. If you give my college students a lab coat, they will not. Neither will I, actually, it turns out. So you give kids, and they like the idea of being a scientist. So you give them a lab coat at a certain age, and they will wear it all day. It doesn't matter what they're doing. They like that idea of projecting themselves as a scientist. And so one of the things is we were doing lab work dissecting mussels, and some of the mussels had actually rotted inside their shell. And so when you open it up, it's basically a putrid mussel, and it smells absolutely ghastly. And it was outside of the hood, and these students were just like, oh, this is horrible, here, you smell it, right? And so that experience sticks with them. They will talk about it for years to come, that sort of visceral thing. And the same thing here. So one of the programs we've done, it's actually a national Mussel Watch program that we're involved with, a statewide expansion of that program, and I had high school students out this is actually at midnight, because that's when the tide is low, so that's also why my camera camera sucks, is that you can't take pictures with reflective vests on with a flash. But yeah, so we had students out there at midnight doing muscle sampling for this national program. And then I've also taken Lincoln High School kids out to Mount St. Helens, where I do research to kind of reward them for some of the research that they've been doing. So trying to make it unforgettable so that it sticks in their brain and they can sort of relive that idea when they think about, hey, maybe I want to go into science or engineering. And you have to make it important. Again, no busy work assignments. So they actually have to, at all these ages, they have to be collecting something that somebody cares about and that you will do something with their data. I've learned this through my college students. They care about their grade, but they couldn't necessarily care less about what I think about what they did. So on the other hand, if you then say that, well, all of their reports are going to go to Department of Fish and Wildlife for information on this particular lake, they get really nervous and they care a heck of a lot more about what they do, and they put a lot more time into it, and they actually learn a lot better. So we try to do that as well. So this is actually just a couple examples. So these are Bellarmine High School students on the left who are actually part of a current research project I have going on in lakes having to do with arsenic bioavailability. So they luckily are scuba trained. So they're not scuba trained to go into a nasty lake, it turns out, but they are scuba trained to go out here. So they helped us install some instrumentation and designed the instrumentation with us actually as part of their project. And then I've worked with Lincoln High School and Sammy kids on this muscle research. And one of the things that I found was great was to actually have them come and present their research as part of the undergraduate research symposium we have here on our campus every year. And they get to show off with all the college students. And again, it's that idea of getting them to think of themselves as college students, as scientists. So you want them to have something real to show. And overall, you want to give them ownership so that they don't feel like science is what somebody else does, that science is something that they do. And so one of the things I do with my own students here at UW is to try to give them an idea, sort of give them the reins. And so we have a program with First Creek Middle School where they go out and they do what's called a science cafe. And so they have to interpret environmental chemistry concepts for middle school students, which is really entertaining. Occasionally really messy for the poor school when we've hit the ceiling with some of our experiments before. But they get really into it. It's really fun to sit back and watch all the students take over as teachers and take over as, having to manage the class and that sort of thing. And we've been asked back, we've done it for 6 years now, and we've been asked by the principal at the time to actually come back and do it for the entire school, which can't do, but we try to get back there every year and give the students. My students learn a lot about the concepts by having to do this. Their students pick up a lot and kind of get the idea of, hey, these are college students. So it turns out I have learned I am no longer cool. And the mere fact that I use that word tells me that I'm no longer cool, rad, boss, fat, or anything along those lines. So, so they look up to college students that they can sort of see, and so they identify with those students. So it's really nice to continue to do that. And then recently I also have done one of the many projects I've done is to try to get students, kind of similar to what Robin was talking about, give them an idea of creating short videos that would actually show off some of the issues in the Puyallup River watershed. And then we've had a film festival for 2 different years where they get to show off and potentially win awards. And so I'll show you an example of one of these winners here. So this was actually created entirely by Jason Lee Middle School students. The sound, they got some help down here. They got to come down for a day and work with Paul Lovelady and some other folks down in our media lab, who I've worked with for years on different projects, and it was really nice for them to be able to put these things together. And the whole idea behind this is, again, they're doing something real. It actually goes up and people now see it, and then they're likely to show this off and educate other people, their parents, any friends that will listen, all that sort of thing. And so the more that we do this, the more that we actually get more students interested in doing environmental studies, environmental science, STEM of some sort, and we also get them to educate others and kind of build that momentum behind things. So I believe very strongly in doing this sort of stuff over time. And so one of the things that I'm following up on this next is, I've been doing a lot of this, but there aren't enough of us out there doing it. And so the idea that I have now is figuring out how do you help make it easier for others to do the same sort of community engaged research. And so we have a current project going. One of the things that I found out is that to get you want to reach not just one class of students. You want to reach. We've been having schools ask us, if our students are going to do this, we need you to reach the entire grade, right, or the entire school. And that's very daunting as somebody who's got other things I have to do with my time as well, but I would love to be able to do it. So one of the things we're learning is to be able to, one, recruit teachers to be involved in this stuff, to teach them how to do a lot of these projects so they can run a lot of the data collection with their students and doesn't require us to be there to do a lot of this stuff. That's a way that we can expand the reach of these things. And so one of the things that I've had to become familiar with is what are called next generation science standards. So for those of you who aren't involved in the K-12 world, and I am just posing as somebody who knows this stuff. You basically, to reach the teachers, you have to show how the work that they're going to do with the kids will meet or address one of these standards that they get tested on later on that they're supposed to cover. And so what we're working on is basically taking new researchers, so those people from UWT and WSU. This is actually a former student of ours from WSU who's at WSU right now, who's got a research project going on. So her idea is to bring in kids to actually collect data for that project. So we're trying to bring in real projects that need data collection to figure out where it fits into the next generation science standards so that we can then package it for the teachers to say, hey, here's what it would meet. This is how it's relevant to your grade. Do you want to get involved in this? And so last year we had a workshop with the researchers to help them figure out how they would do their research with these K-12 students involved. This year we actually brought in teachers to get feedback on the projects and their questions and concerns about how they would get their students involved and to get their buy-in. And so hopefully next year the plan is to actually pilot these things in a number of schools. So we ended up with, I believe, 7 of the 10 school districts in the watershed were actually participating in this thing this past summer. So that's the next stage in things. And it's kind of interesting because I do a whole lot of other things that a lot of my research is what I consider to be community engaged, but I don't talk about any of that because I think this is really the important stuff, is to actually get new people in the door, both as students and eventually doing work in these areas. And so that's what I'm giving you today. Thanks.